Welcome to Tuesday Talks with Shawnee Alliance Church.
It is our desire to invite you into conversations about the life topics and questions we all face.
Wherever you are in your faith journey, we invite you to explore the freedom found in a transformed life.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Sarah and glad to be hosting and back on today. And today, Bridget and I get to talk about having hard conversations.
Woohoo! We're so excited about this.
Talk about a hot button topic, right?
Yes, absolutely. Because this is an unavoidable, well, I guess you could avoid it if you wanted to. But this is a necessary part of life.
Sure.
You can avoid it if you choose to. But
Sure. I would say, so let's talk about culture, right? We talked about before, we're kind of conflict avoidant.
Well, we make that as a sexy thing. Think about the way that language is used, oh, I'm conflict avoidant, or oh, I'm an oversharer, or oh, it's culturally sexy to say that.
Kind of, yeah. But I was processing that a little bit this morning too, about the conflict avoidance. And as society, we say that, or on a personal level. So I'd rather avoid it because it's more comfortable. But I think as a society, we almost idolize it.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is, watch the news, watch social media. It's almost this passive way of having conflict.
Yeah. Well, because we're all afraid. I jokingly remember when I was talking to Chris when I first, started working here, we were just talking through conflict styles and stuff. Because I do believe that people have different ways that they have conflict. I don't think that's wrong. But I said, I'm totally fine with conflict as long as I know I'm not going to have a loss of love. And I'm like, isn't that everybody though?
Yes.
if you knew you actually, I thought about I'll just jokingly say my mom and I have a lot of conflict, but I'm 100% positive that there is no love there and there's no loss of relationship.
Sure.
And so that for me, I just a joke about that, but that is true. That is a really secure relationship for me. And so I'm really comfortable having conflict or different opinions or whatever it is because I'm secure in the love. And I think that, one of the reasons that we are conflict avoidant is not because we're bad people, but it's because we're all people desperately longing to be loved. And if we're afraid that that's at risk, we're afraid that if we actually have this hard conversation that you will stop loving me or you will remove affection from me. It's really easy just to numb out and say, yeah, I'm just not going to have the conversation.
Sure. And that answers a big question that I had this morning as I was processing this again. Who are you comfortable having hard conversations with and why? So that's a great analogy that, hey, my mom, I could have a hard conversation with her because I know I'm loved. And I know in the end that we may not agree, but it's still a comfortable thing because I'm not losing anything.
Correct. I think another place, our staff meetings, we have lots of conflict.
Yeah.
I don't say that in any negative or derogatory way. There's how many people around that table. We all have different opinions, experiences, belief on certain things. But I would say it's 100% accurate to say that we have deep trust for one another around the table. So those conversations are actually really safe and really helpful. And we do get really beautiful results from that. Because they're people that we trust. So I think the biggest thing is who is safe to have conflict with and the people that you trust. I think that social media has made it you have a right to have conflict with any other person on the screen. Do you have any level of authority in that person's life? If the answer is no, I would probably caution you, might be none of your business.
Right.
And that's really hard because it's I'm trying to protect them. I don't want them to, go off a cliff. Or I don't want them to make this bad decision. It's hey, number one, it's not my job, right? It's not my job to keep people alive, and it's not my job to keep people from sinning. And so being able to have those places, conflict is a really beautiful, I always say, conflict is always an invitation to deeper connection. Now, it can end up really bad if both people are being mean to each other, but conflict in and of itself is not a bad word.
Right. we've kind of made it. We've twisted it. Another thought that I had this morning is we like to be conflict observers,
Correct.
but we fail to be effective conflict communicators.
Yes.
So observing conflict, great. I have no responsibility in that. I have no follow-up. I have no accountability. But do I feel angst? Is there that conviction that, oh, something's not right here? There's something that we need to press into. So what if that happens and it's not one of those people that you feel like it's comfortable with? Because there are still necessary conversations that have to be had, even if the comfort level or the trust isn't there.
Yeah.
How do we step into those, honor the situation, and work through to the right outcome?
I'll give you a best case scenario and a real case scenario. I think number one, a lot of this has to do with our belief and understanding around conflict from childhood. So your body will respond to what happened as you were learning about conflict. So if you learned that conflict was really unsafe, that you were going to be either physically, mentally, or emotionally abused in conflict, like it would make a lot of sense that when conflict comes up, you go, yep, no thanks, not about that life. And so I just think about this. It's sad, but it's one of those things where I've healed enough where now it's funny. I was in California last year, and there was a homeless man outside, and this other man drove by in his big pickup truck and starts cursing and screaming at the homeless man to leave. And all of a sudden, my body flares, and I'm in fight or flight, freeze, like feel like a little girl as an adult, like do not want to get out of the car, like grabbing my friend's arm, like not. I'm like I can't talk. You just have to get me out of the car. Yeah, and I'm just like, okay. And it was this moment of flashing back to a situation that I had with a little girl of watching two adults engage in conflict outside of the car, where I was really concerned that the people were fighting, that they were going to come through the window at me. And so I go back to, right, like I am 100% safe in what's happening in the present, but my brain doesn't know that. My brain goes fight or flight. Like I actually chose freeze in that because I couldn't pay attention to what was happening. I had to breathe. I had to get out of the car. And then I had to process later because I was like, hey, I think the thing I want to get to with that's kind of a dramatic story, but we all have those types of stories in some capacity, is that just because you're in the, that's a big conflict moment. Not conflict in the sense where I'm fighting with somebody else, but I'm watching a conflict take place and it's making me feel really unsafe. It may not be the best time to process that when you're in this triggered state. And so taking a breath and saying, whoa, wait a second. This is not a place for me to process through what I'm feeling. Or we could take an example of if you're having a heated conversation with your spouse or having a heated conversation with a coworker or a friend or whatever it may be, like take a moment to breathe and say, hey, I actually want to have some resolution to what we're talking about, but I want to give you my best self, and I cannot do that right now.
Yes.
Like, I can't do it right now.
So that's the self-awareness part of it.
Yeah.
So, yes, something in my past, whether that was trauma or just life experience, has triggered me to respond to the situation in this way.
Yeah.
How can I modify that behavior as an adult, or heal, understand that there's nothing wrong with you because that happened as a child before you're able to process it.
Correct.
So now as an adult, I can think through those things and process through it in a different way. And it can also be, I think, not just, well, it's still a personal experience, but how are you, like, what climate were you raised in?
Yeah.
So if you always observed people being conflict avoidant or passive aggressive, we've all seen that, right?
Yeah. We've all done that.
Or you see conflict and the person is very not honoring, that is addressing a situation, and then the other person on the other side is very defensive. That is just, as we read and study and walk through life and get better at these things, those are all red flags.
Yeah.
So am I doing it? We really have to be self-aware. Yes, our emotions. And what is my body language saying in these moments? Because we do have to say, I'm sorry. That was,
Correct. Saying that wasn't appropriate.
Yes.
Yeah, and I've had to do that in conflict where because I've gone into that triggered state, I've done or said something that was super dishonoring. Because again, inside of me, I'm going into self-preservation mode where I'm like, I just need to protect me. And again, that's an innate thing that we're wired with that should work, right? They always joke and say that should work when you're being chased by a lion. That shouldn't work when, or you have to retrain your brain that like a hot stove is not the same thing as someone making an unkind statement to you. But your brain really doesn't know the difference in pain. It just knows, hey, I'm in pain right now. I'll do anything I can to get myself to safety. What was your original question? Oh, what do you do like when it's someone that you have to have conflict
Yes.
with? Okay.
Yeah.
So again, I do think the level of authority and commitment is important because I'm not. So if someone cuts me off in traffic, right? I'm not going to get out of my car and be like, hey, I'm really sorry. I hope, I'm feeling triggered. You're not going to have that conversation.
No.
There's zero level authority. But you're like, hey, let's say you have a conversation with your child's teacher and there's something happening in the classroom that you're not comfortable with. There is a level of commitment and trust there that these aren't going to be your best friends, right? But there's someone in your life that holds some level of authority in your family. Therefore, there is ground to have healthy conflict and communication. So I do think conflict is always level, like it's always equal to your level of relationship.
Sure.
There are certain things that when I'm sitting in a pastor role that I will address with people that I may not come in with the same language if I'm talking to one of my good friends, right? Because I'm saying, hey, do you want me here as a friend or do you want me here as like a pastoral voice? And having those types of dialogue, I think that changes. I mean, that's the same way as if you work at a bank, right? And you have incredible financial wisdom and someone comes in and has a financial advisory meeting with you, great. And then your sister-in-law is having financial problems, but is basically saying, this is just the way I want to live my life. I'm just going to blow all my money, right? So you may actually carry that level of financial authority, but that relationship is different and you haven't been invited into it.
Right.
And so I think that's a really great way to protect conflict is to say, what actually is the relationship dynamic that I'm part of and what's appropriate here? And get help. Like people will say, I can't believe you just come up with this. And I was like, I don't. There's a lot of language because I know I'm either a fighter or a freezer. So in conflict, I either charge, I will annihilate you, or I do nothing. It depends on what trigger's being hit, what trauma is kind of resurfacing. Yeah. And so lots of great books. There's a great Instagram account. It's called The Secure Relationship. Yeah. Has really great little graphics of how do you use new language. We've talked about the Connection Codes book before on the podcast by Glenn and Phyllis Hill. That's a really great way. And they give really good examples of friendships, parent to child, spouse to spouse. For me, that's how I learn is I actually need to see it happen. And like you said, most of us have not had healthy examples of what conflict looks like.
Correct.
And so one of the easiest ways and the freest, that's not a word, a free way to learn how to have healthy conflict is to actually reach out to books, podcast, e-courses. Danny Silk has the Keep Your Love On podcast, the Kylo Show, and you can look up the website Loving on Purpose, and they have lots of great stuff of how do you process your conflict in a healthy way.
Sure.
So I just say, don't hold any guilt that you don't know how to have healthy conflict. I would say I am still on a very deep process of learning what that looks like. But also I don't have to sit in a pity party and say, oh, well, just because I didn't learn this growing up, I I'm just stuck here forever. It's like, no, I actually can go learn from people that have that.
Yeah,
or,
absolutely.
Find people in your own life that you go, oh, they're actually really good at having conflict. I would say I have 2 people in my life that I would say are excellent with conflict. And reaching out to them.
Yeah, reaching out to them, looking, how do they do that? Or asking, hey, you did really well navigating through this conversation. Please tell me how you process that. And just getting that dialogue or that thinking pattern from different people. And one thing that really kind of, gets on my nerves or what is the thinking that, having these hard conversations comes easy to certain people.
Correct.
I would say in my childhood, it was just very much, a traditional background. The kids are quiet. They should sit in church well. And I just kind of grasped a hold of that. If I'm silent, I'm good thing.
That's powerful.
And that's yuck.
Hard. Yeah.
That is yuck. And unpacking that over the years is hard. And to have a hard conversation is never easy for anyone. It's just something that it's a process that we learn, that we grow into, I'm stuck on that. If I'm not honoring the other person, it doesn't matter who's right or wrong or what it's about. If I'm not honoring them as an individual, God created them good, just like he created me to good. Yeah. So, how do you align on that basis first and then get through whatever else you have to afterwards? Because let's focus it back to Jesus and then the rest makes sense.
Yeah. I think the most frustrating part of conflict is you can't control the other person.
But you're also not responsible for them.
Oh, not responsible for them, but I think that when we're in pain, that's what we want. We want to be able to control how they respond, what they say, what they do, and that's not our responsibility, but in our sense of I'm trying to keep myself safe in a situation where I'm afraid I'm going to lose love, that's a really normal response.
Right. But we need to anchor ourselves with their response does not fulfill my needs.
Correct.
Where does that lie?
Yeah.
And that is hard. That is a learning. That is my emotions are saying this, but my heart is saying that. You have to practice that. Because, I love you. You love me. We're at different places in our lives. Are we always going to come at a certain situation in the same perspective? No. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Because we process things differently. We're going to have conversations where, yes, we both understand where we want to be at the end, but how are we going to get there?
Yeah. I think, number one, acknowledging that we ourselves bring some baggage into conflict. Number two, reframing the narrative that conflict can be done well. And you can create, I call it making a track record of trust, right? So maybe you're listening and you're the person that explodes in conflict, of going off the wall, having the meltdown. Maybe you're the person that shuts down in conflict and is like, what's wrong? Nothing. Fine. No big deal.
Yeah.
Right? Or maybe you're the person that you've been really intentional to engage in healthy conversations about it. I think that we all show up, right, in different situations with some of that. And building that track record of trust to say, hey, I've known that in the past I've shown up to this conversation in a way that wasn't honoring to you. And I want you to know that I'm really sorry about that. And I would like to learn to communicate in a way that's more honoring for both of us.
Yeah.
Now, that conversation feels weird because we don't typically talk like that, and movies don't show you that. Movies just show you the explosion, the leaving, the breakup, the heartbreak, the whatever Hallmark tries to sell you. And it's like, well, this is the only way that conflict happens. And so it is a little weird.
Sure.
Be okay that it is a little weird. And as you I would rather you start with some cut and paste training wheel phrases to learn how to have healthy conflict than try to pretend to figure it out all on your own and be stuck in a pattern that you can't get out of without any outside help.
Right. Well, and you could be in a relationship, your spouse, with adult children.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. That's endless. Parents, that you have been in that, well, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to cause conflict, so we're not going to deal with that. And if that has built up for years and years and years, don't walk into a room expecting to have a conversation and talk about it all. Focus on one thing at a time.
Correct.
And, just honor that you were part of the process to do that. And I've actually had that conversation.
Yeah.
Hey, I realize this is my part of the deal.
Correct.
And this has happened for years. And I take full responsibility for that part.
Yeah.
Can we work on this? And just be clear. If you have to even outline your thoughts for a while, like where do we want to start? And when the topic gets off of that, stop.
That's actually a really helpful tool because both people, one of the things I always tell people to do when you're going into a hard conversation is to have both parties, whoever you're talking to, list their intention for the conversation and what their expectations of the conversation are, right? Because let's say you and I are talking about planning a conference, right? My intentions might be to make sure that we have the guest speaker list, that we have lunch prepared, and that we know what graphic we're using on social media. And you might come into the meeting with, I just want to make sure that the building is reserved, that we've sent the email that needed to be sent, and that we have the hospitality team ready. Now, we could even cause conflict going in, not necessarily that was a hard conversation to have, but it could just be a big conversation. Both of us coming in and saying, that wasn't my expectation. So even just being able to adjust those expectations before you even get into that can be helpful. I think you can use that tool for either, but I think especially when you've had a difficult conversation to say, hey, I'm going to need to come back to this. I think that's fine too. Like, don't feel like anytime you have a conflict with somebody, you have to resolve it right away, all the way. I think that sometimes you can say, hey, I actually need a breath for a moment. Again, you're building that track record of trust. So if you are leaving, you have to make sure that you're communicating when you're coming back.
Right.
So I don't get to just, be involved in a texting conversation with a friend and then all of a sudden get angry and just ghost and leave. I don't get to do that. I get to say, hey, I'm actually processing a little bit of what you just shared with me. I would like to get back to you this afternoon, or I would like to get back to you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Funny story. So one of my best friends in high school ended up marrying my brother. I can't believe that she did that. And when she told me in the beginning that she liked my brother, I was like, I don't know how to process this information.
Right.
And I literally told her, I was like, hey, I need you to know that I love you. I cannot talk to you about this tonight. I need to talk to you about it. And we laugh about it now because they've been married for several years. But it was one of those moments where it was like, I just can't do this right now. And that's not fair for you to sit here in something where you're sharing that's really important to you and I can't match you. Can't do it.
Yeah.
But I would say that, like, just sharing your expectations of like, hey, my expectation is that, like, I really want to honor you, but I can't do it right now. So let's have a conversation at a later time when we can.
And that goes back to healthy boundaries. We've talked about all that stuff on the podcast and our services.
Yeah.
And I love that. Don't ghost someone. Teens listening today, you can relate to that. And there is power to honoring someone, but saying, I'm not going to have that conversation. And if you need help navigating through that as a teenager, as a young adult, we'd love to help. And please look at these resources that will be shared and just lean into, okay, what is the purpose in this message? You can misread text messages. You can misread, I've encouraged my girls. When you can please have a conversation.
Correct.
And yes, this happened. And yes, you gave a firm, you actually asked me, how should I respond? Great conversations to have,
Absolutely.
parents. Because they're navigating a field that we didn't,
Yeah.
I'm aging myself. I did not have texting when I was in high school.
Yeah.
But they're navigating through communicating in relationships in a different way. And it is very hard to have a face-to-face hard conversation, which when all you've ever done is message someone over the phone.
Yeah.
So lean into that. Help. I mean, we're all learning this,
Yeah.
I would say, but in a different way.
Correct.
So that's kind of on my heart.
Love that.
Hey, having hard conversations, it doesn't end.
No. And I think as you have more practice, the anxiety lessens.
Yes.
Again, that's going to be like our catchphrase for this. Like, as you build a track record of trust of someone who can have conflict in a healthy way, yes, you will most likely fail a lot in those places. But as you can build a track record of trust, like, it does get less scary. I think about situations and times where I've had to say no to things professionally or personally. And as I practice that more, and I think that's right, like, there definitely have been times where I'm like, hey, I don't actually know how to respond to this email. I've asked you that.
Yeah.
I've been in a professional setting where I've needed to, handle something and say, hey, I'm not comfortable being part of this. And checking, because sometimes when you're in the heat of the moment, you go to send something that's not appropriate to send.
Right.
Or having those notes. I don't think that's weird. I actually was listening to a podcast yesterday, and it was like mind-blowing to me. I can't believe I never thought about it. But it was two entrepreneurs they were talking about how they started their business, two men.
Yeah.
They actually went to relationship coaching to how to relate to each other as business partners.
It's important.
That's huge. Yeah. And it's like, it's not just couples counseling or marriage counseling. Like, you actually can go and say, hey, this is actually someone that I have deep care for, and I want to have a partnership with them, whether that's business or family or however that may be, church. And I just was like, oh, that's brilliant. Because they were just talking about, we had a lot of conflict about our business, that we saw things in different ways, and we needed new language of how to communicate to each other. And I was like, if that's not super brave and strong, I'm not sure what is, because that's just such a great tool that, like, you don't have to figure it out all by yourself. That's not the same as like triangulation. Have you heard of that term? Where it's you pull a third party into the conflict to be on your side so that you make the other person look like the bad person. Right. So that's not what we're talking about.
No.
We're talking about an unbiased third party, friend, counselor, pastor, coach, business partner, whoever it may be, that can come in as an unbiased person and say, hey, I see both sides, and this is how we can help communicate in a better way.
Yeah. Or even just knowing the different personality styles, communication styles, knowing, hey, my team member is strong at this. I am not.
Correct.
So they are better equipped to answer that challenging question than I am. Maybe I should process it with them before I give a response. Yeah. I think we're in that society where everything has to be instant, and we think things have to be fixed instantly, and that includes, having a conversation and it's done. And it's not always.
Yeah. I think kind of as we wrap up, some of the closing, like, baseline things to remember when you're having a hard conversation. Number one, you're bringing baggage into the situation. So take ownership for your part. Sarah, you said that. Yep. Take ownership for your part of the conflict. Number two, assume that people are not trying to hurt you. They are trying to protect themselves.
Right.
And that's where we engage with compassion towards another person, and we say, hey, I actually believe that you're good, right? God made me good. God made you good. I believe that you're good. And so while I do not have to violate myself because of your bad behaviors, right? If you're having a conflict about, hey, I'm uncomfortable with the way that you're speaking to me or the way, that you're treating me, I don't have to stay there.
Right.
But to say, hey, like, this actually, your response isn't actually about me, it's about you. And just coming in with lots of extra love and knowing that you can take a break.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to all happen at one time. And like you said, for many of us, we've had conflict cycles and conflict patterns in our families and our friendships and our marriages where we're like, hey, this has happened for a long time. And give yourself grace that like it's going to take some time to unwind that and create a new healthy path.
Yep. Yeah. Good. Good talking to you again today and being here on the podcast. And reach out to us if you have any other questions, and love to continue the conversation with y'all later.
Sounds good.
All right.
See you guys.